day, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another guide. This time, this is for Octavia, dictated by Queen Tigress from the Twitch channel, who decided this was the frame we're going to be learning about today. So this is my general purpose beginner's guide on how to play Octavia. Now, Octavia is a lovely frame. She may seem like a bit of a mystery at first when you first see her, but she is a lot of fun. She is a frame that requires synergy, where all of her abilities are powerful in of themselves on their own, but together they can make her one of the most powerful frames in the game. That is a word, I'm going to use it. Now, Octavia excels at scalability because all of her abilities are scaled by sound. And this can scale infinitely because at whatever level the enemies are going to be, you know, it's going to scale based on the level and how much is happening. And because there's no number that it's scaling by for the most part, it's almost able to go up to any level depending on what's happening. So we're going to look at a general build, we're going to look at the general playstyles, we're going to look at the individual abilities, and we're going to see, we're going to take a quick, a little beginner's guide on how good she is to play as a whole. So first of all, let's take a quick look at her abilities. The mallet. The mallet is the little, oh god, get up here. The mallet is a range-based ability, and most of what you're going to find here is Octavia bases very heavily on range, with a mixture of duration. Now, as I mentioned at the start, a lot of what Octavia has is buff-based and utility-based, but also scales on that damage. Now, the one here is a radial area based on your range, and anything within this area is going to take damage. Now, on its own, this is going to give you a nice little buff as it goes. It's nice by itself, and it will emanate a noise based on your mana chord, which I'll get to later. It's rather vital that you have a good amount of range with this, because this will help you with your second ability, which is your roller. When you combine your roller with the mallet, the roller will put the mallet on top of it and start rolling around with it, which will then in turn can help you take the damage to the enemy, so to say. Now, these are both affected by duration, so the more duration you have, the longer they'll last. So this is where you'll start seeing that the synergy between these abilities is quite useful. Now, we're going to look at the 3, which is the... oh god, I can't... professional stream. Hey guys, Metronome. Metronome is where the buffs will come into play. So your metronome is timed to the music that you've set your mana chord to. Now, there's 4 different buffs you can gain from this. It's basically every part of every good frame put into Octavia, you'll notice very quickly. If you time your crouches to the metronome, or the pace of your metronome, you'll go invisible. And the pacing is based on the beat of your mana chord. So if you have something that's really sporadic, you'll need to duck quite sporadically. If it's something very evenly tempoed, then you only need to crouch very basically. And the good thing about all of these buffs that I'm about to mention is they're refreshable if you keep doing what it is they do. Civic, thank you for following, my dude. Welcome to the stream and thank you for following. Then you have her other buff, which is a jump. Every time you jump, if you look up the top right there, you'll have a buff that goes up, which is called Vivic. It's something. That is movement speed, which is super, super nice. And again, all of this can be based partially off power strength, so if you've got a bit of power strength off there, it'll scale nicely as well. And you can have all these buffs on simultaneously as well, which is super nice. Then her other one is when you have your ranged weapon out. Every time you use your ranged weapon, you'll gain a stacking buff if you time it up with the beat of the mana chord. And that's just extra, I think it's extra damage to the ranged weapon. Either way, then you've got the melee, which is the same thing. You attack with your melee weapon to the beat, and it'll start... it's either attack speed or just overall damage that it'll start improving the damage of, improving on your melee weapon. So the main thing is, the metronome improves the optimization of utility, of buffing, and the great thing is, with the invisibility and these buffs, your team can be affected by them as well if they're within range of your metronome. Now, last but not least, we're going to look at the 4th ability, and to do this, we're just going to summon a bunch of dudes here. Now, the 4 is the amp, and what this does is you'll notice that anything within this ring will start causing your amp to gain a stack. So you'd look up in the top right again. The amp is dictated, the buff the amp gives you is dictated by what is going on within the ring of amp. So if you start shooting, if you start melee attacking, the buff will start going higher, which is what we meant earlier by infinite scalability. So if there's combat going on, if you're walking, if you're running, if you're jumping, it ups the damage of it ups the buff of the amp. And the thing is about this as well is that it actually amplifies when you have your 1, your 2, and your 3 activated on it. The actual amp gets bigger, and as you can see, it starts wrecking havoc. These guys are level 155, and they've just been completely and utterly annihilated. So it's all about that combination of mixing abilities. Now, on top of that as well, Octavia has a natural energy regeneration. For each ability you have activated, you start regenerating more and more energy. And for the most part, you can even treat this as a go AFK kind of frame. Now we're going to get into the semantics of her build and how different types of builds will affect the way you play her. But when you're playing her, it's all about making sure you have your buffs up as much as possible, because that's when Octavia comes into her own. I honestly feel as though Octavia has one of the most potent damage types in the game, because it's not really based on any element type, and it will scale even beyond anything else. The only thing it might struggle against somewhat is armored-based targets, but as you can see, even these armored lancers, arid troopers even, who are basically nothing but armor, these guys are getting absolutely shredded just by the scaling damage as more things come around. So you'll notice that if you go into a mission like, I don't know, a defense mission or something where you're defending a point, Octavia has this amazing ability of then being able to just deal excessive amounts of damage. And without going into too much detail, you can also get a lot of utility from her in things like Eidolon runs. And I've just remembered that her 3, when you get the bullet buff, is actually a multi-shot buff. So that given, you have multi-shot, you have power strength, you have loads of buffs for your team, you have invisibility. There's not much she can't do. There's not much she can't do. She is a very potent frame. She's a very potent frame. Now, we're going to take a quick look at some of the other semantics of her and see about what her other stuff does with the mana chord and the builds. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at her metronome. Now, this is something that a lot of people take a lot of fun over. The metronome is what produces your audio, or the sound and the tempo of your metronome when you're actually using your 3. So if you want something that's really basic and straightforward that gives you a very obvious rhythm to create your buffs with, then you go for something that's very straightforward and very linear. However, you can be very playful with this, and it sort of depends on how you want to work with it. This is not something I'm going to go into too much detail on, because there is so much depth to the metronome as to how it actually affects your buffs. Let it be known that the simpler the sound, the simpler your engagement of buffs. Now we're going to take a quick look at a generic build. This is a pretty generic build for buffing with Octavia. You got to bear in mind that with Octavia in general, you're looking at keeping your abilities up for as long as possible and making the max amount of max amount of range effective with them as well. So there's a lot of personal preference and tweaking based on the mission you intend on going into and how you feel comfortable. But the general rule of thumb, there's a few things you can change and there's a few things to keep an eye on. One is that power strength is not the main ideology with Octavia if you're planning on just going for buffs outright. Although it does help, it's not the main go-to. You can put Intensify in there to make things a little bit more potent, but the scalability comes from the sound and the general activity of what's going on within your abilities. So let's take a quick look at the general build. Corrosive Projection is a go-to. It's probably one of the only mods you really want to worry about. Prime Continuity, I feel like if you're going for smaller maps where you know you don't need the range, continuity is a must. That duration is solid. If you don't have the primed version of these, just use the regular versions. Transient Fortitude is probably the only strength one is pretty nice. You can swap this out for Intensify if you don't feel like losing that duration. It's personal preference. Again, you can swap it out for either. Obviously, Intensify is, I think, a bit cheaper in terms of capacity. Then you've got Augur Reach. This comes from the Plains of Eidolon as one of the bounty rewards. Up until recently, before this came in, Octavia had... It was kind of funny, because before this actually came in, Octavia did have her potency, but this really amplified her potency. Because obviously having that extra range makes all her abilities all that much more effective. Then you've got Constitution, just for that extra duration. Again, this is an optional one. If you would swap this out for maybe a bit more range or something for a bit more survivability. The great thing about Octavia is that her buffs give you natural survivability and damage mitigation as well. And something I neglected to mention earlier as well is that, and something that my Twitch chat pointed out, is that her roller actually reflects back the damage that things deal to it. So it acts like a taunt almost. Anything that is within the radius of the area of effect will essentially be taunted to the roller and the things therein. The mallet? Yeah, the mallet. That thing. Thank you for follows, my dude. Welcome to the stream. If you are just watching, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, this is being done in a live stream. So if you want to come for more guides, click that link down in the description. Now, quick thinking is a survivability thing. Now, you've got to realize, with Octavia, you have natural energy regeneration. You have natural large amounts. You have an initial large amount of mana pool, energy pool anyway. So, quick thinking substitutes is can almost substitute for any form of survivability mod. You can go for those base survivability mods like Vitality or Steel 5 or whatever if you feel like. I personally wouldn't recommend it. This can fill in for any of those, especially if you're utilizing arcanes such as Arcane Energize. Keeping your energy pool up will basically equate to you surviving. Moving on, we then have Stretch for that extra range. I feel as though having at least one range and one duration mod on at any given time is a must. Okay, and then we have Primed Flow or Regular Flow. Again, this is improving your energy max, which then gives you the ability of extra potency for quick thinking. Quick thinking, as mentioned before, and something my chat's also pointing out to me as well. They're quietly backseat gaming with this. Quick thinking, you have a lot of survivability with Octavia anyway, with her invisibility, with her damage mitigation. Quick thinking is there if if you somehow lose invisibility and you're doing a very high level mission. It's so easy to survive with Octavia on any situation. But just in case you get caught out, quick thinking is what is there for those sticky situations. And in terms of efficiency, because you have that constant energy regeneration, there's not a massive need for efficiency, so Streamline is more than enough. In terms of what you bring for arcanes, it's personal preference. I think Energize is a given just because of that energy efficiency you get. Unfortunately, I don't have a level 3 because I'm a scrub. But the second arcane you bring is personal preference. I personally always go for an offensive-based one, so Arcane Strike. You can go for Arcane Consequence, I think it is, the one that gives you extra movement speed. But it's all personal preference. So again, this is a generalized build. This is going to be good for buffing, and you can fiddle and play with it depending on what you want. If you were to go on a mission that is much more open, you would go with more range. If you would go for a mission which is slightly smaller and more enclosed, say for example Hydron, you could definitely make more use of having more duration and let the duration last over an entire mission. But again, this is personal preference, it's personal tweaking, you find what works for you. This is just a good thing to base yourself on. Now, there are other builds you can go into which can give you potency for things like Eidolon hunts. We're not going to look at those. Those are things that are probably not something beginners are going to want to know about just yet. We might make a video for these in the future. Plus Psycho, thank you for those biddies. What I would say is find what works for you with the base and then play off of it. There are plenty of other guides out there that can give you the idea on Eidolon runs or anything else that she would play with. There are some power strength builds as well that make use of her damage from her roller, that would make more use of the buffs, but this is a really good beginner's build that will help you get into Octavia. So, to summarize, Octavia is a jack of all trades with many attributes from different frames, all mushed into one. When you can synergize the abilities, you get the maximum potency from her. Getting stuck into a large group of enemies will maximize your buff potential with the sound amplification from the amp and the metronome. Making sure you make use of your metronome with the buffs that you can then get, like ducking and crouching to get an invisibility, or shooting to get multi-shot, or hitting with melee damage to get more melee damage, or anything of that nature. It is all about making sure you maintain your buffs and maintain the consistency of those buffs. So with that being said, if you guys have liked this video, please leave a like and a share and a subscribe. Leave a comment down below if I've missed anything, because honestly this is again, I'm not a god at doing these guides, but this is just my personal input on how I think she plays, how I think she works, on the things I like about her, and the sort of situations she works in. If you want to know about any other frames or check out my other guides, there'll be a playlist in the side box. Hopefully you found this useful in some way or another, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video, my dudes. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Ta-ra!